Alright guys, so it is no secret by now that I am obviously a very big horror fan, and with that said, I've obviously seen a lot of horror movies since, honestly, before I can even remember. But out of every horror movie I have ever watched in my life, there is only one movie that I can say genuinely scared and terrified me the first time I seen it, and that is Sinister. I just recently rewatched this movie, and I can genuinely say that it still holds up to the standard that I placed on it as the scariest movie ever. Now obviously, there might be some movies out there that might be a little more creepy or a little more suspenseful, but this is the one movie that has stuck with me that genuinely scared me. The first time I ever watched this movie, I was with my girlfriend. When I was leaving her house and walking to my car in the dark that night, I literally called her on the phone because I was that scared. If you guys want to learn more about the scariest movie of all time, aka Sinister, then go ahead and stick around until the end of this video because that is exactly what we are going to be talking about. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Haydxn, and today we are going to be taking a dive into Sinister. So without further ado, go ahead and grab yourself a snack and a drink, sit tight, and let's get into it. This movie follows a true crime author named Ellison Oswalt and his family who have just recently moved into a home where a family was murdered a couple of years ago. Each of them were murdered by hanging, but their daughter Stephanie was never found. So in moving to this house, Ellison hopes that he can learn the fate of Stephanie and get a new book out of it. He hasn't had a popular book since his last one named Kentucky Blood, and he's hoping that this is the time he can revive himself and make a new book about these murders if he can figure something out about them. So a couple things to note upon them moving in. Number one, the sheriff and the police, they already don't like him. The reason for that is because he tends to say that the police departments in each town of the books that he's writing aren't very good at their job. He has a lot of theories on things that happened, and one of those theories actually ended up letting a killer go free, so the police aren't too fond of him. Another thing to note is that his family did not want to move into this house with him. He moved them there so he can hopefully get a better idea on this book and try and get some more evidence, and he's hoping that this book is what projects them into the fame and freedom that he needs. So while moving in, he goes up to the attic to store some boxes, and he ends up finding a box that says home videos. Inside of this box there is a projector as well as several reels with titles like family barbecue or pool party, and something that I think is really cool is that these reels are named after the event that took place that took the lives of the family on the film. So with family barbecue, it was a family trapped in their car and someone set the car on fire. With pool party, there were families tied to a chair and they were dragged into the water to drown. The theme goes on for each reel is what I'm saying. So Ellison goes through and watches all of these films, and at some point he does pick up his phone and contemplate calling the police. But as he is on the phone with the police, he looks at his Kentucky Blood books and decides that if he can crack this case himself and write another book, that is more important than reporting the footages of families dying to the police. So that's the route he goes. He hangs up the phone, he continues his work in watching these films and trying to figure out what happened to each of these families. A reoccurring theme to the families in the film is that they all have a child that went missing after the murder. So the whole family was murdered, but there was one child who was abducted that ends up playing a really big role that we will get into in just a second. Meanwhile, his son is beginning to have night terrors again, which is a problem that he hadn't begun to encounter since he was a young child, and there's a lot of weird things going on around the house, like noises or shadows, whatever the case is. There's one part where his son is having a nightmare and he pops out of a box and he kind of like bends backwards. It's so creepy and unsettling, but I love it. The imagery and cinematography in this movie is one of the things that make it what it is. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily the creepiest movie if they didn't have these elements in it, like the way they play darkness or sound effects. It's not like they want to jump scare you every 2 seconds, so when a jump scare actually does happen, it genuinely gets you. And that's something that we don't get out of too many movies now. It feels like there's a jump scare every 5 seconds, and even when there's not a jump scare, you're expecting one. So that's what sets this movie apart from some of the newer movies in the horror genre. And it's also what makes it a lot scarier than the newer movies in the horror genre. But back to the movie, Ellison is starting to encounter symbols in all of these videos that are tying the videos together. And after encountering these symbols, he consults into a guy named Professor Jonas, and this guy will be able to decipher the symbols in the film and what they mean. Professor Jonas ends up figuring out that all of these symbols tie together and resemble an ancient god named Boogle, or Bugal, or Boogal. I'm not really sure. And what this ancient god used to do was kill entire families and take one child. He would take their child to consume their soul slowly, and the connection between this god and everything happening on the films at home is that these are families getting murdered and their children getting taken from them. So Ellison gets up to go and investigate footsteps and noises that he's hearing in the house, and at this point we're starting to see the ghost of the children that this ancient god has taken from their families that have already been murdered. One of these ghost children, Stephanie, who lived in the house that they just moved into before their family was murdered, Ellison's daughter ends up being able to see her, and after seeing her, she paints her on the wall. So at this point, it's safe to assume that the kids can see the ghost children. The next night, Ellison hears the projector going in the attic, and he didn't put the projector in the attic, he wasn't playing anything in the attic, so he goes up there to look, and this is where he sees all of the ghost children sitting in a triangle shape before he ends up seeing Mr. Boogie, which is the official name of this really scary guy. And after seeing him, he finally realizes that he has made a major mistake. He should have left as soon as he got here and as soon as he saw these signs. So he takes the camera and the films and he goes outside and he puts them in a fire and he's burning them, and he tells his wife Tracy, go and grab the kids, pack up everything, we are leaving. So they go back to their old house that they lived in before they moved to this new one where the family was murdered. And unfortunately for Ellison, the projector in the films are in 100% perfect condition shape sitting up in their attic. Obviously this is weird considering he just took them out to a fire and burned them at the old house not even a day ago. But this time there is another envelope and it's marked extended cut footage, and in this one you can actually see the endings of the films where the family was murdered, but the camera slowly turns to the child of the family who did the murders. So this Mr. Boogie demon character guy was possessing these children and having them carry out the murders of all of their families before taking them to his demonic realm. And another important thing to note is that a reoccurring theme for all of these families getting murdered is that they lived in the house that the previous family got murdered. So the first family got murdered and the new family moved into that home and then moved, and then that family got murdered, and then whoever moved into that home and then moved again, that family got murdered, so on and so forth. Basically telling us that Ellison and his family are next up on the list to get murdered since he wanted to move his family into the house that this crime scene took place. It's at this point Ellison looks into his cup and there is some green liquid that looks like it might have been poison to make him fall asleep, and a note from his daughter telling him goodnight. So at this point he passes out and they wake up and the family is tied up and incapacitated in the living room, and his daughter is able to grab a axe under Mr. Boogie's influence and murder her family. So now the box of films is sitting up in their attic in their house, and we get to see the name on the last tape, which is Family House Painting. And that is how we end off on this movie. The daughter of this family was taken by Mr. Boogie, and the rest of the family was murdered. So what is it that makes this movie so unsettling and scary? Well, that's what we're going to get into now. This is definitely one of those movies that keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time. And that's not saying like every other movie doesn't keep you on the edge of your seat. That's not what I'm trying to say. But this movie constantly has twists and turns that you're not really expecting. Like I said previously, yeah, you're expecting a jump scare here and there, but it doesn't happen. And when you finally let your guard down, that's when one pops out of nowhere and scares the hell out of you. Another thing that makes it really scary is the sound effects on the tapes as he's watching them. It kind of sounds like muffled pleas for help, but you can't really tell if it's this Mr. Boogie guy. And then the dark and symphonic music playing behind it, it really plays to your senses and makes you feel like something really cryptic is going on. Arguably, the scariest thing about this movie is the look of this Mr. Boogie guy, and you don't see him much, but that's something that plays to the advantage of how scary it is when he does pop up on screen. This is the same formula they went with in Longlegs with Nicolas Cage. They didn't really show you much of him, but when you did see him, you already knew that something really scary and unsettling was about to happen, and that was the same exact case here with Sinister. I think another thing that makes this movie really creepy in a sense is that it shows a lot of frightful happenings without having to show like the gore or the aspect of all of it. So you're seeing this family tied up helpless in their car, and you're seeing the car being lit on fire, but you're not necessarily having to see the people suffer or burn. And that's how it is with all of these home movies, except for the family that got hung, and that visual is very scary. I think it also helps that we haven't really gotten a movie that shows as much as Sinister shows without having to show too much, if that makes sense at all. Also, I got a new tattoo. It's a It's a Ghostface knife, it goes pretty hard. But Sinister is just one of those movies that you have to watch for yourself to truly understand the scariness and the creepiness of all of it. And mind you, I'm not a guy that gets scared of movies at all. I don't watch a movie and get scared or think that something's gonna happen. I watch horror movies purely for the true entertainment of it. But Sinister is one of those movies that makes me want to look into the dark spaces of any room that I'm in just to make sure that this Mr. Boogie guy is not coming to get me. And this movie came out in 2012, so this is 12 years ago, and it still holds the standard for the scariest movie I've ever seen. Everything about it, it's such an unsettling experience, and you need to watch it for yourself to understand. So with that said, I think you guys need to go and watch this movie for yourself if you have not seen it. If you have seen it, then you already know what I'm talking about. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're going to subscribe to the channel, you might as well click the notification bell because it is literally right there. My name is Haydxn. It was an incredible pleasure having you here on the channel, and I cannot wait to see you guys in the next video. Peace!